this town all to hell.
This is the Filmy McFilm Film Show.
I would consider it probably in my top 5 westerns of all time.
Yeah, it's a fantastic movie. I remember first watching this movie probably about 10, 15 years ago. And it was in a period when I was consuming a lot of spaghetti westerns and a lot of kind of later westerns, like that period in the sort of late 60s, 70s when westerns weren't popular anymore. So the kind of westerns that were being made were a bit different. They were either spaghetti westerns or kind of more counter westerns, like or very, very gritty, violent westerns like Sam Peckinpah was churning out. And I remember seeing it, and I watched it at the wrong time. I remember being amazed by it, but I was watching it when I was really tired, and I kind of was drifting in and out. I remember liking it, but I didn't feel the need to revisit it anytime soon. So when you suggested it, I kind of was like, oh, okay, yeah, The Wild Bunch, I'll definitely watch that, and blah, blah, blah. Got around to watching it, and within the first 5 minutes, I was just 100% glued, because it just feels so different than most of the movies that were coming out in that era. It was so brutal. And these were your heroes, like the characters you followed the whole way through, the characters that you root for. In the first 5 minutes, hold up a bunch of innocent people hostage.
If they move, kill them.
And have absolutely no issue executing them.
Yeah, I mean, it's number one, it's quite a long film. I think it's nearly like two and a half hours. So I can understand why you was kind of drifting in and out of it. There's 2 scenes, we'll talk about the end bit later, but there's 2 scenes that I always remember. Like, I always, for some reason, remember that first scene where they burn the scorpion. And then, like, back then, even, 1960s this was made? Back then, even that caused a bit of an uproar because they really did burn it alive. Like, and everyone was like, shit. And secondly, like, back in the 60s when it was released, the level of violence, everyone was like, this is shocking. You know?
I mean, it's shocking now. Yeah. But the movie, they do a great job of creating... It's a western that's grounded, and a lot more grounded than most westerns probably. Especially around that time period. If you went back to, like, you know, John Ford making his early frontier sort of style westerns, they were pretty grounded as well in their own way. But it felt very real, but also it creates that... It creates the idea of a world where life is so cheap. Like, in reality, in the Old West, shootouts were incredibly rare. They just didn't really happen. Train robberies happened, happened, heists happened, but shootouts just didn't really happen. In this movie, even the way killing is talked about, it's nearly... There's one moment later in the movie where we're introduced to the eldest member of the gang, and he is an old-timer who's a bit of a drunk, always sort of like a bit obnoxious, always kind of like commenting or saying dumb things, and sometimes getting things wrong and causing them more trouble than he's worth.
Yeah, with a handful of holes, a thumb up your ass, and a big grin to pass the time of day with.
At one point, Pike Bishop, the leader of the gang, when someone's asking him about the old timer, he says, "Oh, he's done his share of killing," and he says it nearly in a way where it's like killing is akin to work, like a hard day's work. It's something to be proud of. It's something that should be respected. And the whole movie is like a lot of westerns from this time. It's right at what is generally considered the end of the western era in actual history. It's like 1913, I think it's set. And it's all the classic stereotypes that are in westerns when they're showing like the end of the West. You see at one point the guy's seeing the first automobile they've ever seen, and you know they're talking about like, what is it like, how's it work without horses, and he's saying, one of them saying, oh, I've heard that they're planning to use them in the military and all this sort of things, and so you see all this happening. But it's really interesting how all of the characters that you're supposed to revere the most in this movie are cold-blooded murderers. And you love them. I love the gang. I love everyone in the gang.
Yeah, like...
Especially in the opening heist, the youngest new member of the gang, who is an absolute psychopath.
Yeah, but he gets shot, doesn't he?
He gets shot straight away, but
because he just starts murdering everyone.
Because he's one of the most memorable characters to me, even though he dies in the first about 10-15 minutes.
They get the money and whatever and go off, and then he, for some reason, stays behind. And he just starts cackling like a maniac and just shooting people. And it's like, what are you doing, man?
Well, he's told to stay behind by Pike. And you assume... I got the feeling, because we find out later that the old-timer who's in the gang, who Pike really respects, we find out that that young lad was actually his grandson.
Why didn't you tell me he was your grandson? Well, you had enough things on your mind?
Yes.
And you can see a bit of guilt go on Pike's face, because obviously Pike is interesting because he's got a moral compass. It would be considered absolutely warped by most people, but the moral compass that he does have is extremely strong. And when it comes to things like loyalty and respect, and he is absolutely nearly fanatical in his application to it in his life. But I think the way he sees it at the beginning is that you're the new guy, we don't really have any loyalty to you because this is your first job. You stay here. He tells him, stay here and just hold him up. Don't let him go.
Yeah.
And he basically gives him a death sentence.
It's a bit weird, like, bringing your grandson to a heist. You know what I mean?
I'm not telling anyone.
Yeah, imagine if, like, you just went round your grandma's house and your granddad was like, do you want to rob a bank? And I'm like, no.
Yeah, it's like being in John Terry's family.
Yeah.
But the interesting thing is that, again, that's the kind of people we're dealing with. Like, there's a point... The reason the heist goes wrong at the beginning is because one of Pike's old crew members, and we get a feeling in flashbacks maybe one of his closest friends.
Yeah.
Ultimately, he got arrested and put in prison because of Pike being a bit stupid at one point in the past, being a bit overconfident, not expecting to get caught, and as a result, this former crew member's been put in prison, and he's been forced by the railroad to get together a posse and try and capture this gang.
You'll use what you have, and you'll see to it that it doesn't happen again, or I'll see you spend the rest of your life behind bars. Try to run, I'll be after you, and so will they.
I gave you my word.
Well, we'll see what it's worth.
Because they've been doing so many robberies, costing the railroad so much money. But even it's so interesting seeing their perspective of each other, where Pike has zero ill will, even knowing that his former friend is after him. And he's saying it to one of his friends in the crew at one point, that he gave the railroad his word that he's going to capture us, so that's what he has to do.
He gave his word.
Gave his word to a railroad. It's his word! That ain't what counts! It's who you give it to!
But Pike doesn't see it that way. He sees, like, his friend... And maybe that's also coming from a bit of guilt about the fact that he knows he was caught because of him. But it's great. There's a scene at one point, bringing it back around to what I was saying, there's a scene towards the end where his former crew member, he's trying to track him down, and they're looking for him, and he has just a bunch of idiots with him as his crew.
Yeah.
And he turns to him at one point and says, do you understand? These are men we're after.
We're after men. And I wish to God I was with them. The next time you make a mistake, I'm going to ride off and let you die.
What I took from it, though, Declan, is obviously Pike and his posse, or gang, whatever you want to call it. I think, obviously, later on in the film, they're going this last hurrah, like trying to do one big heist. I think they know, like, at one point they're going to get killed, but they just continue to do it because of the thrill of it, is what I feel about them.
Yeah, and do you know what, as we talk about it, I keep getting thoughts about the movie Heat that we reviewed a few months back. When a character's asked, is the juice worth the squeeze? He says the action is the juice. And it's a similar sort of thing in this story as well. And there was something else you reminded me of, but I can't remember now.
Well, well, to be honest, we'll talk about it, but the last shootout
is
comparable to Heat.
Absolutely.
It's fucking class, man.
So about half the gang get killed and the other half manage to escape. And again, we're introduced to just how ruthless this world is when one of their friends, who's blinded by a shot, and he knows he can't go on, so he says, just kill me. And Pike, no hesitation, shoots him dead. And some of the men want to say a few words, and Pike and the more senior, experienced members of the group to say, no, like, what's the point? He's dead.
And maybe a few hymns would be in order, followed by a church supper with a choir.
Yeah.
Like, are we going to sit around and get caught as well and get killed as well? Let's go. But it's just so... They are right, but it's just so brutal. It's so ruthless.
But the thing is, Declan, they must be so used to that. Like whoever's in their gang, like, because of what they are doing, they're just used to death, innit? Like, obviously, we wouldn't be used to that and be like, oh, shit.
Yeah.
And they're like, fuck it. Let's just move on.
And it's true. And when you think about all of human history, going back tens of thousands of years, hundreds of thousands of years, we are such an anomaly where we don't... Like, I'm Catholics, and Catholics have open caskets generally. I've probably seen more dead bodies just in that form than the majority of other people by tenfold.
Yeah.
And even that is just a very safe, isolated way of viewing death, getting to see death. But most people don't even see death at all, ever. Most people have never seen a dead body in the modern Western world. And we are such an anomaly for having so little violence in our daily lives.
Question, not to sound too morbid.
Yeah.
Changing the subject a bit. When our time comes, would you have an open casket? I'm going to get cremated. Fuck it.
My opinion on funerals... Well, actually, before that, why would you get cremated?
I don't know. I just have a weird feeling about just being underground, just slowly rotting away. I'd rather just get incinerated and it be done with. Like,
fair enough.
Well, it's not going to be my choice, but I suppose I can put it in my will.
My view of it always is that the funeral has nothing to do with you. Like, the funeral is the last person on earth, literally. The funeral is for you. It's for everyone left behind. So I don't care. Having said that, I think it just makes it easier for people if you do have a couple of things laid out, because it's literally just less taxing on an already stressed mind where you just have to, the less decisions you have to make. It's probably better, so I'd make decisions for that. But genuinely, I don't care. The only thing that I would want to happen after my death would be... I'm a pretty big believer in donating as many organs or body parts as you can. So I'd want that. Eyes and all, whatever. Other than that...
you can't have an open casket then. You'll look like you'll look like a fucking madman.
It'd just be an empty suit. And a skeleton.
Them's washers. Damn.
They set it up.
So... They escape. They realise that there's no even gold in the stuff they've stolen. It's all little what do they call the end? The little metal pieces in building work.
Them's washers.
They're all washers.
Yeah.
So they're like, fuck, we don't even have any money. We're gonna have to do another gig. But in the meantime, they're gonna go and hide out in one of their Mexican gang members' village, and it's a village that's part of supporting a revolutionary group who are fighting the army at the time, because they see it as a bit of a dictator, and there's a particular general who's operating in the area who's a real dictator and a bad guy. And Angel, the Mexican gang member, is very passionate about one day his people being free and Mexico as a whole being free and all this. But anyway, so this is one of the periods in the movie where there's a lot of... It's quite easy to break the movie up into periods of action and periods of downtime. And I actually love the periods of downtime. I think I actually prefer them even to the action moments, because you really, before you've got to see the quirks of the characters and people are spitting good one-liners and stuff, but here's where you really get to see and learn more about the characters. And the actual gang members themselves are all brilliant characters. Like, they could all have their own spin-off movies. Like, Angel's a really interesting character because he's really passionate about his people and passionate about, you know, getting independence for his people and being a revolutionary. The right-hand man to Pike is just a dude, man. He's just doesn't he just seem like such a great guy the whole way through it?
Yeah.
And then the two dinguses, who are like these two best mates, they nearly come across like hillbilly sort of type characters.
I'm sorry, in westerns, like every single gang is always a token Mexican guy and two retards.
Yeah, it's true.
Literally every single time. Like, but yeah, like it is quite a cool gang, man. I'm not gonna lie.
So after this, we're introduced to the general. So he's this bad guy who's basically running the area, and he's one of the big villains in the movie. But like with all westerns, when it's not so black and white who the good guys and the bad guys is, our heroes almost always end up at one point working with the big villain in the movie.
Yeah.
So they meet typically in this movie and in this world, they meet under circumstances of a murder. So one of Angel's former love interest, when he returns to the village, he finds out that she's run away. And to his distress, he discovers that she is basically now a lover of the general. And for a second when they meet, it seems like she does feel guilty, but then she turns to mocking him. And she's quite rude. And she goes off and she's sort of like, you know, stroking the general's chest and looking back at him and laughing. So Angel just pulls out a gun and shoots him.
Puta! No!
In front of everyone.
I was quite shocked by that. I was like, I wasn't expecting that to happen.
It's fucking nuts.
Like,
and after it gets really tense, and after a minute, and everyone's drawing guns on each other, and then they ask like, "What's the deal? Like, why did he shoot? Why did he try and kill the general?" And they explain the reason, that Angel's like upset about his woman and all this, and they all just start cracking.
yeah, they just start laughing. Like,
they're all loving it.
He just murdered someone, and they're just like, "Huh."
And then Pike and the gang are looking at each other like, "Yeah, let's laugh with them." So they all start laughing, and everyone just laughs about it. And then they're all mates, and they meet later.
Yeah.
And he recognises the gun they have is American Army issue, and so he straight away, the general basically ascertains that, okay, these guys are white bandits. They have nothing to do with me. So if I get them, pay them to do a job, there's no real way that it could ever link back to me. So I want a big shipment of American military top grade armaments, everything, guns, weapons, explosives, a lot.
Soon you will be the best equipped general in Mexico.
So next we have our next big set piece, and the Pike and the gang head off to rob this train. But before they go, Angel, obviously, he hates this guy. He represents everything that's bad for him in his world, especially for his people in his village. So he's dead against this. He's like, I'm not working for this guy. But someone has the idea, basically, that why don't they just give him 10% of the arms that they steal, and he can go and arm his village, and that will be, he won't take any money. That will be his cut of the deal.
My people have no guns. But with guns, my people could fight.
So everyone's happy with that, and they head off. And this set piece is kind of probably the least impressive in the movie.
Yeah.
It's more a case of it goes to plan, but his old crew member and the posse are waiting for him, because once again, he knows him well enough. He knows Pike well enough where he's kind of just predicting roughly what he's going to do. Obviously, he doesn't know he's got this agreement with the general, but he just knows like somehow that he's going to do this. So anyway, so they're waiting for him, and they give chase. Once the heist more or less goes okay, they get the armaments, they're going off on the train, they're waiting around the corner, they get the stuff off, it's all going well. But the posse that's after him, they try and ambush him and chase him down. And they manage to get away by blowing up a bridge as they're crossing it. And falling into water and getting swept away and whatever. So the crew get away again, but by this point they know they, once again, like Heat, they've got the heat on their back, people after them, but they have to do this one last heist because they got fucked over and they need the money.
The bridge blowing up sequence kind of reminded me of what film is
Good,
it?
the Bad,
Good,
and the Ugly.
yeah, Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, where he kind of like lights the. Does he light a cannon with a cigar and the bridge blows up? There's always like a bridge blowing up in a western.
Yeah, that's one of my all-time favourite sequences in a movie. It nearly feels like Good, the Bad, and the Ugly takes the second out from the movie it is, just to make a point about the Civil War and how bad it was.
What was made? Good, the Bad, and the Ugly was made before this, wasn't it?
It was made, I think, in 1966, and Once Upon a Time in the West was made 1 year before it. So this was made, 1969.
Okay, so like 4 years, kind of 3 years
something like
afterwards,
that.
yeah.
So anyway, so they get across and they make it back with the armaments, and Angel has got the 10% of the arms to his village. So he's happy, they're happy. The next big problem is figuring out how to get the armaments to the general without being double crossed and still getting their money.
Yeah.
So do you remember what did you think of the scene in the valley? You know, where some of the locations they have in this movie are so amazing as well. Like a lot of westerns.
Yeah,
like
yeah.
That moment where they're in the valley and they're surrounded by like those cliff edges and they're walking through. It must be where an old river had carved through it, kind of like the Grand Canyon. And they're surrounded by all the Apache men who are in cahoots with the general, and he's got all the armaments there, where they probably could just take it off him, but he has it by dynamite, ready to go off.
Please, cut the fuse.
But yeah, so that whole sequence is great, and basically we get into a period of the movie where it's kind of a logistics point in the movie. They know that the posse is after him, and they're trying to find a way to bring in some arms at a time to the general while getting some of the cash back. And they're basically clever, but for the story wise, it doesn't matter too much. For character wise, it doesn't matter too much what's happening during this period. The key thing that happens is when they finish the exchange, and Angel and this right-hand man to Pike are the last people to drop off some armaments and get the cash. And everything's good, they're all happy, everyone's going to part ways. The general's especially happy as Pike said, the machine gun wasn't part of the deal, but they just give it to the general, what they call as their gift.
Yeah.
That's our present to the general.
So it's like another way just of being like, kind of just greasing the wheels a bit, like being friends. So the general's delighted, he's happy, he's fine giving over the money. But Teresa, the lover of Angel, who he shot, her mother, who was obviously from his own village, went and told the general that they had received these arms from Angel. So he knows that Angel, the whole gang maybe, but Angel at the very least has double-crossed them.
Yeah.
But the general only takes Angel. He doesn't bother with the other gang. So the gang have to abandon Angel to his fate. He's lassoed and he starts being dragged around and tortured, and they're powerless to help him. They just have to leave.
Yeah.
He's a thief. You take care of him.
Buen viaje, mi amigo.
You like Angel, you like the right-hand guy, you like the gang. It's more seeing the face of his friend when he has to pretend he doesn't care about Angel.
Yeah.
He says, whatever, he's a traitor. I don't care what you do to him. And you know he doesn't mean that, and you know he's going to try and come back and save him. But the feeling of how uncomfortable and awkward that would be to have to lie through your teeth and say, imagine like me or you having to be like, oh fuck Phil, take him away and kill him.
I was thinking that. Imagine if you're like remember when like all Somali gangs used to like hijack boats on the sea and shit, and it was like they had two of your mates like held up. They were like, choose which one's gonna die.
Yes.
And I'd be like, oh, this is terrible, man.
But not just that, you also have to pretend you don't give a shit.
Yeah. No.
And like riding away on his horse with that feeling.
I mean, as we already discussed, these Pete's are used to death, but you could tell that he was upset about it.
Oh, it's
Do you know
brutal.
what I mean? Yeah.
So the lads, they end up actually having to go and stay the night in the general's camp.
Yeah.
Because he loves them. He thinks they're great. He doesn't care, even if they were trying to betray him probably at this point, because they're just like, he's like, you got me so many weapons, I'm so happy. Come, everyone's getting drunk, he's throwing prostitutes at him and hookers at him and drink and food and saying, just chill, don't worry about it. And they're kind of accepting of what's happened. Like, they accept that it's fucked, but we just have to chill and, you know, we have to spend the night here and whatever. We may as well get some hookers and do this and do that. But even at the start when they first go in, Pike is pretty assertive about wanting to buy back Angel.
Yeah.
And the general really dismisses it quickly.
Welcome, amigos. You come for your friend, no? I want to buy him back. Levantenlo.
And it's pretty obvious that he's not going to entertain that for a second. And it's interesting because if you break it down, nothing really happens in the next sequence. But clearly, it's all they do is, you know, they go and sleep with some prostitutes and they drink and whatever. But Pike, at some point, something about what's going on, Pike clearly just decides at one point, no, we're going to take back Angel. But why do you think, what do you think happens in that time? Do you think it's just a time of reflection, or do you think anything that happens, because they take a lot of time focusing on how he treats the prostitutes and how he interacts with everyone during that period?
I mean, number one, Declan, like, I was listening to your point about them drinking all the time and shit. Like, I don't know how they got anything done, because like half the film they just got like bottles of whiskey. I think it's whiskey.
Yeah.
And they're just down like literally down in whiskey.
Well, I'm pretty
and I'm
sure
like, fucking hell, mate.
In most eras, especially like in medieval times, but probably up until really recently anyway, and covering this time period, generally clean water was so hard to find that a lot of time it was considered safer to drink alcohol,
And
which gives you a different view on how fucked up most of
and bearing in mind, like, these people are just constantly riding horses through deserts and shit, so there wouldn't be any water anyway. But they must have been so dehydrated. Literally, like, they're going through the hot heat, like, down in bottles of whiskey, man. But back to your point, yeah, I think it is just a period of reflection. He just kind of, like, looks at himself and, like, kind of evaluates what he's doing. I think.
Yeah, and it's
hard
interesting
to tell.
because when he's with the prostitute, I felt like in some way it linked back to his flashback where we saw he wanted to marry a woman at some point. He was in love with a Mexican woman.
Yeah.
And her husband had left or something and they were together. Maybe they had an affair, I don't know. But the husband came back one night when they were in bed and managed to shoot her and shoot him, but not a fatal shot.
Mm.
And he ran off and he was never able to find him. And whenever he's with a prostitute, you generally see, you know, the two dinguses, they don't mistreat the prostitutes, but they're just really obnoxious and, like, out for a party.
Yeah.
But whenever you see Pike with a prostitute, he's very courteous, very gentle, very whatever. Very respectful, with, like, when he's hanging around them. And you get the feeling, I got the feeling maybe that he thinks a lot about the fact that he never was able to wrong that right.
But I think Pike's a lot older than those dinguses. Like, you know, I think he's a lot more mature. I don't know how old the dinguses are. But
but I don't think the dinguses, like, look at the old timer. He's not exactly mature.
True, good point.
He's old, but he's not exactly mature.
Yeah.
But I think Pike, he couldn't walk away.
Yeah.
He couldn't, because the whole way through we see how much you talk about loyalty as well, where he still has a sense of loyalty to the man who's trying to capture him.
Yeah.
He has so much loyalty to the old timer. And he says at one point, you know, we don't abandon people.
Yeah.
Once you throw your lot in with someone and you say you're that, you know, this guy is a part of my group, this is who I'm with, you stick by him. And it doesn't matter what he does, and it doesn't matter what happens to him or the situation, like, you go and do that. And it's interesting because It's one of the great moments where they sell. You completely know what they're planning to do, even though nothing's said.
Let's go.
Why not?
But they know what he means.
It's like Heat again.
Yeah, and we know what he means.
Yeah.
But why? And so comes the final big standoff.
The final standoff. Well, I said to you before we started the pod. Actually, this pod, it is like, I think it could be the second best shootout after Heat. It's got everything. It's got a fucking huge Django machine gun.
Yeah.
Obviously, the shootout starts because that guy's throat gets cut, innit?
Yeah, well, they won last time. They asked that they want Angel.
Yeah.
What do you want? What do you want, Angel?
The general pretends like he's gonna give him back, and then slits their throat. Then all hell breaks loose.
But obviously, all hell breaks loose. But the Wild Bunch, because I guess that's what their name is, the gang, they must have known that they were gonna die, man, because they were outnumbered like 3-1, basically.
Well, and one thing I found really interesting in the shootout is he slits their throat, and they're all kind of like ready to shoot, but no one's actually shooting at first. Everyone's got their guns and they're all aimed at each other. And Pike is looking around, and he's looking around, not looking for someone, I don't think. He's more looking around, just trying to gauge the situation. And it settles down, and it nearly seems like violence could definitely be avoided at this point.
Yeah.
And then he sees the German advisor, who's the guy, the right-hand man to the general, who's this German character who's advising him on military and armaments from a European perspective. And he's just kind of plays a prick. Like, he's like sort of a stiff upper lip type, doesn't like these ruffians type characters. And when Pike looks around and he spots him in the crowd, he just shoots.
Yeah.
It's like he just thought, do you know what, you prick? If I'm gonna die, I'm making sure you die today as well.
I would do
I want
that,
to shoot you.
To be fair.
So all hell breaks loose.
Like, if I knew I was gonna die and if I was in a room with like Donald Trump, I'd just be like, fuck.
Yeah,
or someone.
It's that classic thing of
yeah.
if you knew an asteroid's hitting the world in 7 days, you know, some people are going to be like, I'm gonna fuck as much as I want. Some people are going to be like, I'm going to do as many drugs as I can. And some sick people are going to be like, do you know what, all the people that have ever pissed me off, I'm going to fuck.
It's funny you say that, because I watched that film about that the other day. Not Up. The Seeking a Friend for the End of the World.
Oh yeah, is that any good?
Yeah, it was Steve Carell and Keira Knightley. It's basically exactly what you described. An asteroid's hitting the Earth, so they just go around doing bare shit. It's actually decent. But yeah, he shoots the German. All hell breaks loose, and I think sadly all of the Wild Bunch die apart from one. Is it? One survives.
No one survives.
No one survives. Yeah, you're right.
Everyone gets killed, but they take out nearly the general and all his higher ups and virtually every single one of his troops in the process.
Yeah.
A lot of it thanks to the machine gun, which they quickly take over. But it is an absolute bloodbath, absolute massacre. Everyone dies.
Yeah.
And then the next day, the old member of the crew who's been chasing them the whole time comes into the town with his posse, and he this is a great part of the movie because he's kind of been like, even though he's against them, he's after them, he has been like sort of like the phantom member of the gang. He always actually felt like a part of the gang still. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And the way he spoke, like he was open about it, the crew of people that he was forced to take to hunt for them. He was open with them about the fact that he didn't respect them and he wished he was still with that gang. So when he comes into town and he sees that they're all dead, he wants no part of it. He just says, go take their bodies to the posse, take them back to the railway, get your money, get your freedom, whatever it is you want. And he just sits down, and as he's waiting for whatever his fate to come. I feel like he secretly knows that the revolutionaries are hanging around the area and they're going to capture him and kill him anyway, and he just doesn't care.
Yeah.
So he lets him go off, and the old timer who we thought had died or been captured returns with the revolutionaries from Angel's Village, and they come in, they kill the last remaining men, and the old timer meets with your man waiting outside the town, and they have that last little piece of dialogue exchange, and it kind of just beautifully sums up the movie.
It ain't like it used to be, but it'll do.
And it just perfectly puts a bow on the whole idea of the movie. Like this, it was about that savage world coming to an end, and the kind of, when you think about life nowadays is so civilized, so soft, so easy, and do you know what? That is a good thing. I'm not going to sit here, I'll romanticize the old ways when I'm watching a Sam Peckinpah movie. No problem.
Yeah.
I'm not going to, when I stop and think, I have no illusions that it was actually really something to esteem to. But when you think about the kind of world that human has come out of, humans as a race, like history is savage, history is brutal, humankind is brutal. And the funny thing is, even this brutal version of life that we wouldn't recognize or be able to last 5 minutes in is an unbelievably sophisticated and moral and easier way of life than like nature.
Yeah.
Like it's still, even that, even though it seems so crazy to us, is an absolute triumph that any animal could ever get to the point where they could even have ideas of what's right or wrong or what to do and moral ideas of things. But the movie perfectly encapsulates what it meant, like the kind of men it took to survive in these times and to thrive in these times, and how cheap life could be, and how important things like as much as the negative moral shortcomings were amplified, where life was so cheap and people would murder over like small monetary earnings and things like that, but also a lot of the positive things were amplified as well. Like sense of loyalty that you would have to have, probably in modern times you could only find in a military setting when you're actually at war with your fellow soldiers. But that's the kind of thing that would have really had to be the norm. Like, even think about how people talk about just a few decades ago, the way neighbours were with each other, always looking out for each other's kids and things like that. The world is becoming less and less like that. The more, and it's because of, technology and advancements like that, the less we have to rely on each other, the less we will rely on each other. But there is a loss that occurs because of that. And that's a big rant, and it probably has nothing to do with what Sam Peckinpah was ever trying to actually achieve. But that's how I felt watching the movie, and that's the feelings it kind of gave me. It made me realise that the connections between people and the moral compasses, however warped it might seem to us now, how important and significant they were in the Old West. And that, I think, is the heart of the movie and the heart of what's going on with the characters. It's all about loyalties and belief systems.
I think that sums it up nicely. As I said, I think this is my top 5 westerns of all time. Got great action set pieces, but more than that, it's actually a really good, like what you were saying earlier, the lulls in between the action set pieces are like really good character studies, and some of that is actually better than the action set pieces.
Well, for instance, the scene where they're all in the sauna.
Yeah.
And it's just a bunch of lads in a sauna. But it's brilliant. Like, it's one of the funnest parts in the movie. And the two dinguses are off with 2 prostitutes, and they're getting drunk, and they're shooting barrels of wine and drinking from that. And then they come into the sauna later, and they're saying, "Oh, I'm engaged to be married," and he's dead serious. And Pike is getting really close to the coals, and they're saying, like, "How can you do that? Like, you must be roasting." And he's saying, "I'd live in this if I could."
Yeah.
And those moments is when you really get to know the characters, and that's why it's such a sucker punch when they all die at the end.
It is a testament to the director that when these people actually die, I mean, if you want to call them scum, some of them are a bit scumbaggish, but you are sad when they die, and it's kind of like...
I mean, they're all psychotic murderers.
Yeah. Well, they are scumbags, yeah.
But
you still feel...
I love them, I'm not saying that criticism of you, but they're more than scumbags, but there's no point where it's even ambiguous whether you're rooting for them. You love these guys. And
that's where you must credit the director for good work there. Even though they are scumbags, he makes them very likeable. So that's a good testament to his skill on this film.
And Sam Peckinpah in general, he had a way of making films where his violence wouldn't be cartoonish, and the adult content wouldn't be cartoonish, but even some of the most horrific things wouldn't be that uncomfortable to watch. Like even in Straw Dogs, like the most uncomfortable Sam Peckinpah scene I can think of is, some of the rape scenes that happen in Straw Dogs, which is a great film if you've ever seen it.
I have seen it.
But even that, like, it's filmed in a way where it feels as brutal as it should be, but it doesn't feel tasteless or crude or anything. Like he has a way of depicting violence where it sits right in the zone it should sit.
Yes.
It's negative and it's not nice, but it doesn't leave a bad taste in your mouth.
All in all, I would highly recommend this film. Not even if you're not a fan of westerns, it's a good watch in general, I think. Like,
what's some of your highlights?
Well, obviously the end shootout was fantastic, man. But other than that, like the general, I'm not going to call them lulls because they're not really lulls, but
the downtime, when they're just chilling out.
Yeah, just like as you said, the sauna scene when they're like just fucking around, getting drunk on wine. I was like, these are great guys. I wish I could hang around with them.
Yeah, for me, the things that I come off remembering the most is the friendships in the movie.
Yeah.
And the friendships between different characters and the dynamics within the group and within the gang and the bonds that the characters had between each other. Even when one of those characters is now trying to pursue and capture and kill one of his older friends, there's still a bond that I don't feel like they never meet in the movie face to face. I feel like they know each other, and I do know, like in a flashback, they're together face to face. But the friendship is spoken about, and the bond is spoken about individually by themselves to other people, to a point where I believe in that friendship so much and that bond so much, and it's why I don't challenge the logic that they would have basically gone on a suicide mission to save their friend Angel, who probably wasn't going to survive his torture wounds anyway. I completely go with that because the whole movie has spent 2.5 hours up to that point building all these friendships and all these bonds. So to me, that's what the movie's about, and it's one of the best westerns ever made, one of the best movies ever made, and if you're new to Sam Peckinpah, it's probably the best film of his to start with in order to get a feel of the kind of movies he made and then get stuck into the rest of his back catalogue. So that's an easy recommendation for the Wild Bunch.
This is the Filmy McFilm Film Show.